Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Reading Corner with MooseChangerPat.
That's me, in case you're wondering.
Today we are reading Chapter 14 of Magician's Gambit by David Eddings, and as always, you can support the original work by buying the original book. Chapter 14. The snow gradually slackened throughout the rest of the day, and by evening only a few solitary flakes drifted down through the darkening air as they set up for the night in a grove of dense spruces. During the night, however, the temperature fell, and the air was bitterly cold when they arose the next morning. "How much farther to Prolgu?" Silk asked, standing close to the fire with his shivering hand stretched out to its warmth. "2 more days," Belgarath replied. "I don't suppose you'd consider doing something about the weather?" the little man asked hopefully. "I prefer not to do that unless I absolutely have to," the old man told him. "It disrupts things over a very wide area. Besides, the Gorm doesn't like us to tamper with things in his mountains. The Olgos have reservations about that sort of thing." "I was afraid you might look at it that way." Their route that morning twisted and turned so often that by noon Garin was completely turned around. Despite the biting cold, the sky was overcast, a solid lead gray. It seemed somehow as if the cold had frozen all colors from the world. The sky was gray, the snow was a flat dead white, and the tree trunks were starkly black. Even the rushing water in the streams they followed flowed blank between snow-mounded banks. Belgarath moved confidently, pointing their direction as each succeeding valley intersected with another. "Are you sure?" the shivering Silk asked him at one point. "We've been going upstream all day. Now you say we go down?" "We'll hit another valley in a few miles. Trust me, Silk, I've been here before." Silk pulled his heavy cloak tighter. "It's just that I get nervous on unfamiliar ground," he objected, looking at the dark water of the river they followed. From far upstream came a strange sound, a kind of mindless hooting that was almost like laughter. Aunt Paul and Belgarath exchanged a quick look. "What is it?" Garin asked. "Rock wolf," Belgarath answered shortly. "It doesn't sound like a wolf." "It isn't." The old man looked around warily. "They're scavengers for the most part, and if it's just a wild pack, they probably won't attack. It's too early in the winter for them to be that desperate. If it's one of the packs that has been raised by an Eldrakin, though, we're in for trouble." He stood up in his stirrups to look around. "Let's pick up the pace a bit," he called to Mandaralin, "and keep your eyes open." Mandaralin, his armor glittering with frost, glanced back, nodded, and moved out at a trot, following the seething black water of the mountain river. Behind them, the shrill yelping laughter grew louder. "They're following us, Father," Aunt Paul said. "I can hear that." The old man began searching the sides of the valley with his eyes. His face creased with a worried frown. "You'd better have a look, Paul. I don't want any surprises." Aunt Paul's eyes grew distant as she probed the thickly forested sides of the valley with her mind. After a moment, she gasped and then shuddered. "There's an Eldrek out there, Father. He's watching us. His mind is a sewer." "They always are," the old man replied. "Could you pick up his name?" "Grull." "That's what I was afraid of. I knew we were getting close to his range." He put his fingers to his lips and whistled sharply. Beric and Mandaralin halted to wait while the rest caught up with them. "We've got trouble," Belgarath told them all seriously. "There's an Eldrak out there with a pack of rock wolves. He's watching us right now. It's only a question of time until he attacks." "What's an Eldrak?" Silk asked. "The Eldrakian are related to Algroths and Trolls, but they're more intelligent and much bigger." "But only one?" Mandaralin asked. "One's enough. I've met this one. His name is Grull. He's big, quick, and as cruel as a hook-pointed knife. He'll eat anything that moves, and he doesn't really care if it's dead or not before he starts to eat." The hooting laughter of the rock wolves drew closer. "Let's find an open place and build a fire," the old man said. "The rock wolves are afraid of fire, and there's no point in fighting with him and Grull." "Let's find an open place and build a fire," the old man said. "The rock wolves are afraid of fire, and there's no point in fighting with them and Grull if we don't have to." "There?" Durnick suggested, pointing to a broad snow-covered bar protruding out into the dark water of the river. The bar was joined to the near bunk by a narrow neck of gravel and sand.
It's defensible, Belgarath,
Beric approved, squinting at the bar.
The river will keep them off our backs, and they can only come at us across that one narrow place.
It'll do, Belgarath agreed shortly. Let's go. They rode out onto the snow-covered bar and quickly scraped an area clear with their feet while Dernick worked to build a fire under a large gray driftwood snag that half blocked the narrow neck of the bar. Within a few moments, orange flames began to lick up around the snag. Dernick fed the fire with sticks until the snag was fully ablaze. "Give me a hand," the smith said, starting to pile larger pieces of wood on the fire. Beric and Manderolin went to the jumbled mass of driftwood piled against the upstream edge of the gravel and began hauling limbs and chunks of log to the fire. At the end of a quarter of an hour, they had built a roaring bonfire that stretched across the narrow neck of the sand, cutting them off completely from the dark trees on the riverbank. "It's the first time I've been warm all day," Silk grinned, backing up to the fire. "They're coming," Garin warned. Back among the dark tree trunks, he had caught a few glimpses of furtive movements. Beric peered through the flames.
"Big brutes, aren't they?"
he observed grimly. "About the size of a donkey," Belgarath confirmed. "Are you sure they're afraid of fire?" Silk asked nervously. "Most of the time." "Most of the time?" "Once in a while they get desperate. Or Grull could drive them toward us. They'd be more afraid of him than of the fire." "Belgarath," the weasel-faced little man objected. "Sometimes you've got a nasty habit of keeping things to yourself." One of the rock wolves came out onto the riverbank just upstream from the bar and stood sniffing the air and looking nervously at the fire. Its forelegs were noticeably larger than its hind legs, giving it a peculiar half-erect stance, and there was a large, muscular hump across its shoulders. Its muzzle was short, and it seemed snub-faced, almost like a cat. Its coat was a splotchy black and white, marked with a pattern hovering somewhere between spots and stripes. It paced nervously back and forth, staring at them with a dreadful intensity and yelping its high-pitched hooting laugh. Soon another came out to join it, and then another. They spread out along the bank, pacing and hooting, but staying well back from the fire. "They don't look like dogs, exactly," Dernick said. "They're not," Belgarath replied. "Wolves and dogs are related, but rock wolves belong to a different family." By now, 10 of the ugly creatures lined the bank, and their hooting rose in a mindless chorus. Then Sinedra screamed, her face deathly pale and her eyes wide with horror. The Eldrak shambled out of the trees and stood in the middle of the yelping pack. It was about 8 feet tall and covered with shaggy black fur. It wore an armored shirt that had been made of large scraps of chainmail tied together with thongs. Over the mail, also held in place with thongs, was a rusty breastplate that appeared to have been hammered out with rocks until it was big enough to fit around the creature's massive chest. A conical steel helmet, split up the back to make it fit, covered the brute's head. In its hands, the Eldrak held a huge steel-wrapped club, studded with spikes. It was the face, however, that had brought the scream to Sinedra's lips. The Eldrak had virtually no nose, and its lower jaw jutted, showing 2 massive protruding tusks. Its eyes were sunk in deep sockets beneath a heavy ridge of bone across its brow, and they burned with a hideous hunger. "That's far enough, Grull," Belgarath warned the thing in a cold, deadly voice.
"Grat come back to Grull's mountains," the monster growled.
Its voice was deep and hollow, chilling. "It talks?" Silk gasped incredulously. "Why are you following us, Grull?" Belgarath demanded. The creature stared at them, its eyes like fire.
"Hungry, Grat,"
it growled. "Go hunt something else," the old man told the monster.
"Why? Horses here, men, plenty to eat."
"But not easy food, Grull," Belgarath replied. The hideous grin spread across Grull's face.
"Fight first," he said, "then eat. Come, Grat, fight again."
"Grat?" Silk asked. "He means me. He can't pronounce my name. It has to do with the shape of his jaw."
"You fought that thing?"
Beric sounded stunned. Belgarath shrugged. "I had a knife up my sleeve when he grabbed me. I sliced him open. It wasn't much of a fight."
"Fight!"
Grull roared. He hammered on his breastplate with his huge fist.
"Iron," he said. "Come, Grat, try to cut Grull's belly again. Now Grull wear iron like men wear.
He began to pound on the frozen ground with his steel-shod club.
Fight, he bellowed. Come, Grat, fight. Maybe if we all go after him at once, one of us might get in a lucky thrust,
Beric said, eyeing the monster speculatively. Thy plan is flawed, my lord, Mandaralon told him. We must lose several companions should we come within range of that club. Beric looked at him in astonishment.
Prudence, Mandaralon? Prudence from you?
It were best, I think, should I undertake this alone, the knight stated gravely. My lance is the only weapon that can seek out the monster's life with safety. There's something to what he says, Hedera agreed.
Come fight,
Grull roared, still beating on the ground with his club.
All right,
Beric agreed dubiously.
We'll distract him then. Come at him from two sides to get his attention. Then Mandaralon can make his charge.
What about the rock wolves? Garin asked. Let me try something, Durnik said. He took up a burning stick and threw it, spinning and flaring at the nervous pack surrounding the monster. The rock wolves yelped and shied quickly from the tumbling brand. They're afraid of the fire, all right, the smith said. I think that if we all throw at once and keep throwing, their nerve will break and they'll run. They all moved to the fire. Now, Durnik shouted sharply. They began throwing the blazing sticks as fast as they could. The rock wolves yelped and dodged, and several of them screamed in pain as the tumbling firebrands singed them. Grull roared in fury as the pack dodged and scurried around his feet, trying to escape the sudden deluge of fire. One of the singed beasts, maddened by pain and fright, tried to leap at him. The Eldrak jumped out of its way with astonishing agility, and smashed the rock wolf to the ground with his great club.
He's quicker than I thought, Beric said. We'll have to be careful.
They're running, Durnik shouted, throwing another fiery stick. The pack had broken under the rain of burning brands and turned to flee, howling back into the woods, leaving the infuriated Grull standing alone on the riverbank, hammering at the snow-covered ground with his spiked club.
Come fight, he roared again. Come fight!
He advanced one huge step and smashed his club at the snow again. We'd better do whatever we're going to do now, Silk said tersely. He's getting himself worked up. We'll have him out here on the bar with us in another minute or two. Mandaralon nodded grimly and turned to mount his charger.
Let the rest of us distract him first,
Beric said. He drew his heavy sword.
Let's go!
He shouted and leaped over the fire. The others followed him, spreading out in a half circle in front of the towering Grull. Garin reached for his sword. Not you, Aunt Paul snapped. You stay here. But do as I say. One of Silk's daggers, skillfully thrown from several yards away, sank into Grull's shoulder, while the creature was advancing on Beric and Durnik. Grull howled and turned to charge Silk and Hedar, swinging his vast club. Hedar dodged, and Silk danced back out of reach. Durnik began pelting the monster with fist-sized rocks from the riverbank. Grull turned back, raging now, with flecks of foam dripping from his pointed tusks.
Now, Mandaralon!
Beric shouted. Mandaralon couched his lance and spurred his warhorse. The huge armored animal leaped forward, its hooves churning gravel, jumped the fire, and bore down on the astonished Grull. For a moment, it looked as if their plan might work. The deadly steel-pointed lance was leveled at Grull's chest, and it seemed that nothing could stop it from plunging through his huge body. But the monster's quickness again astonished them all. He leaped to one side and smashed his spiked club down on Mandaralon's lance, shattering the stout wood. The force of Mandaralon's charge, however, could not be stopped. Horse and man crashed into the great brute with a deafening impact. Grull reeled back, dropping his club, tripping, falling with Mandaralon and his warhorse on top of him. "Get him!" Beric roared, and they all dashed forward to attack the fallen Grull with swords and axes. The monster, however, levered his legs under Mandaralon's thrashing horse and thrust the big animal off. A great flailing fist caught Mandaralon in the side, throwing him for several yards. Durnik spun and dropped, felled by a glancing blow to the head, even as Beric, Hedar, and Silk swarmed over the fallen Grull. "Father!" Aunt Paul cried in a ringing voice. There was suddenly a new sound directed behind Garin. First, a deep, rumbling snarl, followed instantly by a hair-raising howl. Garin turned quickly and saw the huge wolf he had seen once before in the forests of northern Erendia. The old gray wolf bounded across the fire and entered the fight, his great teeth flashing and tearing. "Garin, I need you!" Aunt Paul was shaking off the panic-stricken princess and pulling her amulet out of her bodice. "Take out your medallion, quickly!" He did not understand, but he drew his amulet out from under his tunic. Aunt Paul reached out, took his right hand, and placed the mark of his palm against the figure of the owl on her own talisman. At the same time, she took his medallion in her other hand. "Focus your will," she commanded. "On what?" "On the amulets, quickly!" Garin brought his will to bear, feeling the power building in him tremendously, amplified somehow by his contact with Aunt Paul and the two amulets. Bulgara closed her eyes and raised her face to the leaden sky. "Mother!" she cried in a voice so loud that the echo rang like a trumpet note in the northern valley. The power surged out of Garin in so vast a rush that he collapsed to his knees, unable to stand. Aunt Paul sank down beside him. Sinedra gasped. As Garin weakly raised his head, he saw that there were two wolves attacking the raging Grull. The gray old wolf he knew to be his grandfather, and another slightly smaller wolf that seemed surrounded by a strange flickering blue light. Grull had struggled to his feet and was laying about him with his huge fists as the men attacked him, chopped futilely at his armored body. Beric was flung out of the fight and fell to his hands and knees, shaking his head groggily. Grull brushed Hedar aside, his eyes alight with dreadful glee as he lunged toward Beric with both huge arms raised. But the blue wolf leaped snarling at his face. Grull swung his fist and gaped with astonishment as it passed directly through the flickering body. Then he shrieked with pain and began to topple backward as Belgarath, darting in from behind to employ the wolf's ancient tactics, neatly hamstrung him with great ripping teeth. The towering Grull, howling, fell and struck the earth like some vast tree.
"Keep him down!"
Beric roared, stumbling to his feet and staggering forward. The wolves were ripping at Grull's face, and he flailed his arms trying to beat them away. Again and again his hands passed through the body of the strange, flickering blue wolf. Mandaralin, his feet spread wide apart and holding the hilt of his broadsword with both hands, chopped steadily at the monster's body, his great blade shearing long rents in Grull's breastplate. Beric swung huge blows at Grull's head, his sword striking sparks with the rusty steel helmet. Hedar crouched at one side, eyes intent, saber ready, waiting. Grull raised his arm to ward off Beric's blows, and Hedar lunged, thrusting his saber through the exposed armpit and into the huge chest. A bloody froth sprouted from Grull's mouth as the saber ripped through his lungs. He struggled to a half-sitting position. Then Silk, who had lurked just at the edge of the fight, darted in, set the point of his dagger against the back of Grull's neck, and smashed a large rock against the dagger's pommel. With a sickening crunch, the dagger drove through bone, angling up into the monster's brain. Grull shuddered convulsively, then he collapsed. In the moment of silence that followed, the two wolves looked at each other across the monster's dead face. The blue wolf seemed to wink once, in a voice which Garin could hear quite clearly, a woman's voice. She said, "How remarkable!" With a seeming smile and one last flicker, she vanished. The old gray wolf raised his muzzle and howled, a sound of such piercing anguish and loss that Garin's heart wrenched within him. Then the old wolf seemed to shimmer, and Belgraf knelt in his place. He rose slowly to his feet and walked back toward the fire, tears streaming openly down his grizzled cheeks.